Hey guys, today we're going to do another headphone amp comparison. This time it's going to be between a tube amplifier and a solid state amplifier. Because I know, people like to debate online which is better. Audiophiles always love to debate different things and compare, the minute differences between different pieces of equipment. So yeah, we're going to take a look at a tube amplifier here, which is a full tube headphone amp, by the way, not a hybrid, and a solid state amplifier. And these are two devices that retail around the same price. So this is the xDuoo TA-26. It's a full tube headphone amp retailing for $300. This is the Drop plus THX AAA 789. This is a well-respected amplifier, I think, online in audiophile circles, also retailing originally for $300. I think you can actually find it cheaper now for maybe even $200, which is a fantastic price for something like this. So yeah, we're going to compare both of these. So I already did a video on the xDuoo TA-26, comparing it against another tube headphone amp, the Little Dot Mark II. But I haven't talked much about the Drop THX AAA 789 yet, so let's just go over the specs of this one. So yeah, like I said, this is a full solid-state amplifier, but what makes the AAA 789 special is that it uses a THX AAA technology. It stands for achromatic audio amplifier, and it's a linear bipolar amp with feed-forward error correction. So supposedly this technology really reduces distortion. So that's what audiophiles like, is when you turn up the amplification and everything, it shouldn't have any distortion, and this amp measures really well as a result. So compared to a full tube amp, which isn't going to measure very well, solid state amps generally measure a lot better, but especially this one, because it has that THX AAA technology, it's supposed to reduce distortion by 20 to 40 decibels for fatigue-free listening. So yeah, it's 2 by 6 watts at 32 ohms. It had 136 decibels signal to noise ratio, a record low total harmonic distortion of negative 140 decibels at 300 ohms, 100 milliwatts. That is pretty amazing, and actually if you check out the Audio Science forum, which is well known actually for being quite finicky, they're known for being real sticklers about the distortion of things, because all they do is measure stuff, right? They actually really highly recommend the THX AAA 789 amp. So as a result, this amp is highly regarded in audiophile circles, even though it's not an expensive amp at all. It's actually, $200, $300, but I would say this is a fantastic value because this is one of the best measuring amps on the market. So yeah, you can go over the specs of this. So actually this has a balanced and regular single-ended unbalanced inputs right here. Yep. So the balanced output outputs 6,000 milliwatts at 16 ohms, 6,000 milliwatts at 32 ohms, 800 milliwatts at 300 ohms, and 400 milliwatts at 600 ohms. So this should be able to drive pretty much any headphone. Up to 600 ohm headphones, which are probably the heaviest headphones on the market, like the Bear T1 first and second generations. Those are 600 ohms. Should be able to drive pretty much anything. The total harmonic distortion, goes up to negative 143 decibels at 300 ohms. So yeah, that's incredible. Signal noise ratio, like I said, 136 decibels, 300 ohms, class leading. So yeah, that's with the balanced output. And the single-ended output, which is probably what I'll be testing, because to do a fair comparison, I'm just going to test single-ended versus single-ended, since the tube amp doesn't have a balanced connection. So at single-ended, I'm going to be using the Bear Dynamic DT1990 Pros, which are around 250 ohms. So it says around 250 ohms or 300 ohms, outputs about 200 milliwatts, and also negative 135 decibels total harmonic distortion, around 300 ohms, 100 milliwatts, and yeah, also around 300 ohms is 136 decibel SNR. And yeah, this is probably what I'll be testing. There are a lot of specs you can find on the Drop website about this amp, but this is a highly regarded amp in audiophile circles. Not too expensive, $200, $300. Let's go over the features. So first of all, this is not a very heavy amp. It's not my first heavy-duty solid-state amp. So a couple of weeks ago, I reviewed the Parasound ZDAC V2, and that amp was actually a pretty heavy amp actually, and it's fairly powerful as well. So I'm interested to compare this amp to that amp. I believe what I remember saying about the Parasound ZDAC V2 is that it was a very powerful amp, I think I only had to turn the volume up around halfway, and it can drive my barriers pretty well. And I remember saying that it was a very forward aggressive sounding amp. So it was like it was pushing like the mids pretty heavily, I would say, and maybe a little bit the upper range as well. I remember it being fairly aggressive and forward. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to compare that one as well because that's a full solid state amp, and also it's a fairly powerful one as well. So it'll be interesting to compare the Parasound Z DAC V2 that I just reviewed a few weeks ago to the Drop THX AAA 789. Of course, that's a much older design, and it also contains a DAC as well. This one does not contain a DAC. I'll be using my Hybie RS6 DAP, which has a built-in DAC, the custom R2R Darwin DAC, to use as the input for both of these amplifiers. And yeah, we have a power button right here, which strangely enough doesn't seem to be yeah, it's like you press it, but then it just goes back out. It doesn't like sink in, which is a little bit weird. So usually I would expect a button like this to be like sunken in, and then you press it again, it goes out. But this one doesn't seem to sink in or go out. I don't know. Maybe it's just the unit I have, or maybe it just works like this as designed. I'm not sure, but it's a little bit weird. Especially since this input right here, it does sink in. So this input does sink in like this, and I can just, you know, push it again to push it out. For some reason, this power button doesn't do that. I don't know, maybe there's some issue with it. Then there's a balanced output right here. So this is, if you have balanced headphones, you can use that, which I will eventually. I have a set of balanced cables for my focal Elexes, but I don't have a 4-pin XLR for it yet. I have a 4.4 millimeter. So I'm going to get a 4.4 millimeter to 4-pin XLR adapter, and then I can test out the balance. But for now, I don't have the proper input for this, or the proper connection for this. And then the single-ended, it has two single-ended inputs. I actually don't know why they have this, because you can just give someone an adapter, right? Like this is 3.5 millimeter, and this is a 1/4 inch, but usually what companies do is they either have one of these, right, 1/4 inch or 3.5, and they just give you an adapter for the other one. So I don't know why they have to have both here. It's like, okay, it's nice, it saves you from having to use an adapter, but I would rather it not take up this much space and just dedicate the space to something else instead. So I don't know, it's a little bit weird. Like usually companies just give you, like, maybe on a high-end headphone amplifier, they give you like, for example, my xDuoo, right, has a 1/4 inch, and that's it. There's no 3.5 millimeter because you just get an adapter for the 1/4 inch, right? So yeah, it's a little bit weird they have both, but it's nice, I guess. You don't have to use an adapter, but still, it's a little bit interesting. So yeah, you can use either 1/4 inch or 3.5 and don't need an adapter now. So there's 3 levels of gain here. I guess one is for, just according to the specs here, I think one should be like 16 ohms, like really like IEMs and stuff like that. And then another one is like, is it 32 ohms? I think it's 32 ohms. Yeah, it's like 116, 132 ohms, and then one is, this one is 300, 600 ohms. So this is for like really hard to drive headphones. But yeah, it looks like there's a really low gain one. The 16 ohms is pretty much like IEMs, basically. Maybe some planar magnetics could be that low. 32 ohms is the normal setting for, yeah, most planar magnetics and dynamic headphones have this setting. Probably 32 ohms would be good for that. And then the highest level for, yeah, my Beyerdynamics or like high-end Sennheisers. Some planar magnetics can be hard to drive as well. Old vintage headphones, AKGs and stacks, have a lot of impedance, so that's probably what this highest gain is for. Most people will probably be using the second level here. And yeah, if you're using IEMs, then use the first level, because IEMs are usually very sensitive. And then you have a volume knob here, and yeah, the input switch, which does go in. Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty much it, and it's not, I would say it's not as heavy as the Parasound that I reviewed a few weeks ago. So this is it's not portable, of course. It's a desktop amplifier, but it's definitely, yeah, it's okay. It's not too heavy. Yeah, definitely not as heavy as a Parasound. That one was really heavy duty. This one is actually lighter than this tube amp here. This tube amp is quite a bit heavier. I think this thing weighs like 10 pounds, yeah. This xDuoo TA-26 tube amp weighs like 10 pounds. Oh my god. But yeah, this one weighs about 3 pounds, I would say. 3.5 pounds. Yeah, so it's not too bad. This THX AAA 789. Alright, let's look at the back here. So what you get on the back is a single-ended input, unbalanced input, which is RCA. And then you get a pass-through RCA as well. I guess if you want to use this as a preamp, you can. Balanced inputs right here. Eventually I will get cables for this. I don't have for this XLR input actually, but I'm gonna get some for my DAPs. I have the Acetylene Current SC100 and HiBR6. I probably am gonna get a 2.5 or 4.4 to use these XLR inputs right here, and then I can have a balanced input and a balanced output eventually, and then DC input right here and auto off bypass. So I guess this will automatically turn the headphone amp off at some point. So it's nice to have a switch here like that to control it. And that's pretty much it. Bottom here, it doesn't say much. So that's it. That's the Drop THX AAA 789. It is a very well respected amplifier in audiophile circles. Especially, it's not that expensive. Like I said, $200, $300. And from the measurements, this is one of the best measuring headphone amplifiers on the market. And yeah, they also sell a cheaper version as well, I believe. They sell the AAA Linear, which pretty much is this, but it removes the balanced inputs and outputs, so only unbalanced. And I think reduces the power as well. And I think that's good enough for most people, because I guess for most people, they're not going to use 600 ohm headphones, and they're not going to use balanced inputs or outputs. So I think they just made a cheaper version, for the majority. But this one is the one for more audiophile, I guess. People use really high impedance headphones. They can drive it, a lot of power on tap, and they have balanced input and outputs. Yep, so that's the Drop THX AAA 789. I actually got it for about $200 here. And then the xDuoo TA-26, which I'm going to compare to. This one, I've already done a video on this before, but just to go over, this is a full tube headphone amp. This uses 2 tubes. It uses a 6N8 tube for the preamp and a 6N5 tube for the buffer. So yeah, I use the 2 tubes. Like I said, full tube, no hybrid going on here, no solid state in here. Just a power switch in the front, a 1/4 inch jack for the phone. Again, no balanced for this one. This volume knob is pretty nice. I remember this amp being very, very powerful. So actually this amp is really, I think full tube amps work the best with high impedance headphones, but when I plugged in my 250 ohm Bears, I only needed to raise it to maybe about 1/4 of the way. Yeah, I only needed a 1/4, like 25% of the power, because this thing is massive amount of power on tap. So it's like unusable for IEMs basically. IEMs are just, way too sensitive. So make sure you use this with tube amps. Really, are good for headphones with low sensitivity and high impedance. And yeah, the back, pretty simple. You only have one set of inputs and outputs. You can use this as a preamp as well. And this thing's really heavy. It's like 10 pounds. This is 10 pounds. This is like 3.5. So it's quite a bit heavier than the THX. But it doesn't measure as well as the THX because it's a tube amplifier. And really, people who get tube amplifiers don't get it for the measurements. They get it because it imparts a coloring on the tone that they prefer. So yeah, I'm going to test out both of these two and then see what the main differences are. I expect there to be a difference because people prefer the tube amplifier for coloring their tones, so I expect some kind of difference for sure on the tone between these two. So stay tuned, guys. Alright guys, so now I got these two headphone amps here. I got the full tube headphone amp, the xDuoo TA-26, and the Drop plus THX AAA789, which is a full solid state amp, and I'm going to compare the two. So I'll be using my Hy-Vee RS6. This is a DAP that has a built-in Darwin R2R DAC inside of it, so it's got a custom DAC that's pretty nice, and I'll be using this one to feed the input into these two. And I'll be using my Beyerdynamic DT1990 Pros. These are 250 ohm headphones, which I like. These are my main headphones. Yeah, I think they're not like the most neutral headphones or something, but I do like listening to them the most. I think to me they're the most enjoyable. And plus they're reasonably high impedance. So yeah, let's test it out here. So first we'll be doing the headphone. So first we'll be using the xDuoo tube headphone amp first, and I'll be testing out a few tracks on each of these and seeing telling you guys what I hear, the differences. And of course using unbalanced inputs for these because the tube one does not have a balanced input, so only unbalanced for both of them, so it's a better comparison. Okay, so like I said, this one has a lot of volume on tap, a lot of power, so I don't need to put the volume level up too high. It's only about 25%, that's all I need. Okay, so as I said previously in my other video when I was looking at this headphone amp, yeah, tube headphone amps really great for vocals. So if you have vocal tracks and stuff, yeah, play some Billie Holiday, some Nina Simone, you know, Ariana Grande, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, whatever have you. It really shines, right? Because the mids are like rich, velvety. I think is how would I describe it? The texture is, yeah, very smooth, rich, velvety mids. So yeah, basically any track that's like mid-heavy, like guitar instrumentals or yeah, just vocal tracks, I think really shine with tube amps. Now, the disadvantage is that the soundstage is not too big, and yeah, for dynamic tracks, with tracks like a lot of beats and stuff, electronic tracks and stuff, it's not the best. So it really does not bring out too much detail on the electronic tracks or tracks with a lot of beats and dynamics. It doesn't really bring that out, so it's not like the most detailed. But for mids, yeah, basically vocal tracks, you know, guitar heavy tracks, it's amazing. So that's a special thing about tube amps. It really brings that warmth, that organicness, the naturalness of the vocals. Sounds really intimate actually, but in a good way, right? It's really rich and velvety. So that's what I really like about the full tube headphone amps, especially this one in particular. This one I compared to the Little Dot Mark IIs. I think this one more so. It gives more of an organic texture. So very rich mids, velvety mids, I would say. So that's the benefit of this tube amp. But disadvantage, soundstage is not that wide and not too detailed on the high or low end. Okay, so next up I'm going to test out the THX 789s. So turn these on, and yeah, it's so weird, this doesn't really go in, it just, okay, I just like this little small indicator light, that's how I know it's on. Whereas the tubes, it's pretty obvious to know when the tubes are on. This one's just like a small indicator light, just to know it's on. I have to really check to make sure it's on. Alright, I'm going to plug into the single-ended, of course. I'm going to start out with the lowest gain setting and see how much gain it actually has. Alright, and plays the same songs. Input here. Okay, put the volume about middle. Okay. So the low gain setting I think is really for IEMs because it's not powerful enough to drive my Beyers. It's pretty small. So it's pretty small sounding on the lowest gain setting. I'm going to turn on to the second setting here for gain. This is the one that most people will probably use. Yeah, so that's fine. Yeah, so the second gain setting for the volume, maybe about 60% is okay to drive these Beyers. But I'm going to try using the third gain setting, and that's really loud actually. Okay. If I turn it up to the third gain setting, then it's pretty similar to this tube amp, where I have to like put the volume about maybe 25%, and at 25%, yeah, it's about the same as it's very powerful. So, yeah, yeah, the third gain setting definitely has a lot of gain on tap. Okay, so this amplifier, what I notice is cleanness. Like as I up the volume or something, like THX advertises the AAA technology, very very clean. There's no distortion. I don't hear any kind of harmonic distortion whatsoever. It's quite different from tube amps, which do have harmonic distortion, but it's like preferable harmonic distortion. Yeah, so it's actually a very different experience going through this amp, because what I notice about this amp is it's yeah, like I don't hear any sort of boosting of any frequency. It's just perfectly balanced. So even compared to the Parasound ZDAC V2 that I reviewed before, that one I think I felt was very forward on the mids especially, and a little bit of the highs as well. I felt was very aggressive, very forward. This one not aggressive, not forward on anything. It's just whatever you hear is just pushed up. It's just made louder. That's it. I don't hear any boosting of any frequency. It's just what you hear. It's like as you turn up the volume, it just increases the volume, and it's no distortion or whatever. So it does exactly what an amplifier is supposed to do. So there's no coloring of the tone. It's totally neutral. So I think that's pretty big difference, honestly, between these two. And it really depends what you want. I can understand why this one is so popular with audiophiles, because usually audiophiles like a reference sound. Reference usually means very balanced. There's no unnatural coloring of the tone, no like unnatural pushing of any frequency. Yeah, just totally neutral, balanced. That's exactly what this is. It's just, I don't hear any sort of boost on any frequency. It just, whatever you hear is just push louder. That's it. Yeah, there's no coloring of the tone. It's just totally neutral. So I guess, yeah, audiophiles might like this. But for me, it sounds a little bit too analytical, and I think this is what people mean by analytical, is that there's no liveliness to the tone. It just, yeah, it just sounds very, very flat to me. Like, yeah, I understand if you just want an amplifier to make things louder, this is exactly what you want. There's no distortion or anything. There's no coloring of the tone. It's totally neutral. To me, it's a little bit too analytical, and what people call sterile is, yeah, it doesn't add any kind of coloring to the tone at all, which is a good thing, right? For an amplifier, for audiophiles, they don't want anything to color the tone. But for me, maybe this is just my preference. Sound is so subjective. I actually prefer the fact that this one colors the tone, and that's why a lot of people buy tube amps, is because they like how it colors the tone. So that's the difference. It's like, this is a full tube amp. When I listen to songs with, you know, a lot of mids, vocal heavy songs or guitar heavy songs, this amp makes it more engaging. It's richly layered. I just feel like the mids are very rich and layered and velvety, right? Like I said, and that makes it more enjoyable to listen to. So I think it brings that out. Really brings the mids out and makes it more rich and layered. Like I said, soundstage is not too great on this one. It's not very detailed on the lows or the highs. This one is more detailed, but it doesn't color the tone at all. So the mids are not as rich or velvety as on the tube amp. So what you're gonna hear is just the song made louder, with, yeah, no extra coloring of the tone, no pushing of any frequency. So really depends what you want, right? I guess if you were pairing like a pretty neutral headphone, like the Sennheiser HD650s, fairly neutral headphone, or even the Focal Elexus that I have, which is more balanced, using this amp I think would be the perfect audiophile experience, because if you're like a studio engineer or a mixing engineer, what you want is exactly exactly what the song is. You don't want any sort of unnatural coloring of the tone at all. So this is really good for like audiophiles, mixing engineers, studio engineers. You don't want anything coloring your tone. Perfectly balanced response, right? It's very neutral, very analytical. For me, I would actually prefer to have something a little bit more fun when I'm listening. So that's why I actually prefer this one. xDuoo tube amp because personally I want something a little bit more fun and engaging when I listen. This one, very engaging on the mids. I love the fact that it brings out the vocals and it brings out the guitar tones in the mids so much. Even though it sacrifices a little bit of the soundstage and detail in the other areas, still it's fun to listen to this amp, the tube amp. This one, a little bit too analytical for me. It's you know, perfectly balanced, perfectly neutral, exactly what audiophiles want, but it's reference sounding, right? But for me, it's not as fun. Like it doesn't, yeah, it just, for me, I like, you know, listening to this one more because it brings out, it colors the tone, and it's just something that I personally like and enjoy. So it really depends what you want, right? Do you want something to color your tone? If you do, this one will color the tone in a good way, and that's what a lot of people like about full tube amps. Really, yeah, for me, brings out the mids, brings out the vocals. This one, perfectly balanced, perfectly neutral, analytical, and reference sounding. Exactly what audiophiles and studio engineers and mixing engineers want. Nothing to stand in the way of the original like frequency. And yeah, I understand why this one's so popular among audiophiles. It measures very well, it's very detailed, almost no distortion whatsoever. Even you can push the volume up very high, no distortion audibly. So yeah, two flavors, really depends on what you want. This is the more reference sounding amplifier, very detailed, very neutral, very balanced. This one is not a reference amplifier at all. It's going to color the sound, but to me it colors it in a good way that makes it more fun. So really that's my final conclusion. Do you want something that's a little bit more fun and engaging but colors the sound? Or do you want something that's very balanced and neutral, doesn't color the sound, but to me it sounds a little bit too analytical and sterile, for lack of a better word. So another thing I have to mention about these two amps is that they're both very powerful, but something I have to mention about the xDuoo TA-26. This is a full tube headphone amp, and really I would highly advise using this with mostly like high impedance, low sensitivity headphones, because with IEMs and stuff that's like really highly sensitive, you're going to hear a lot of background noise, and like you're going to hear hissing maybe, and you can't really make use of the volume knob because this thing just has so much power on tap. Yeah, if you just turn up the volume knob a little bit, it's going to be too loud. So I do not advise using this with IEMs or highly sensitive headphones, but with low sensitivity headphones or high impedance headphones, and this thing can really make those shine, can really open them up more. And really I think that's the strength of full tube output transformerless headphone amps like these. Really good with high impedance headphones. So if you have Sennheiser HD800s or yeah, like Bayer's T1s, you know, those can be driven really well with this, or Stax, you know, old vintage headphones, AKGs or Stax. Yeah, it will work really well with these. Tube headphone amps are usually more picky about the headphones that they'll pair with, but usually in my experience I think they pair much better with high impedance, low sensitivity headphones. Whereas with the drop THX 789s, these pair pretty much well with anything, so they're not as picky as the tube headphone amps are. These ones pair well with anything, and they have a lot of power and tap. So if you have like really highly sensitive headphones or earphones, or you have IEMs or some planar magnetics are highly sensitive, then you just switch it to this low gain setting here, and it can accommodate your needs. If you have just like regular 32 ohm to 80 ohm headphones, then you can use the middle setting here and it'll do just fine. That's pretty much most headphones out there, around like 32 to 80 ohms. You can use it with smartphones, then you can use it with this second setting here, or the first setting. Then if you have really like low sensitivity, high impedance headphones, then you can switch it to the third gain setting here. So this can really drive pretty much any headphone out there and can pair well with any headphones. That's the other thing I gotta mention. So yeah, the THX 789s, they pair well with pretty much anything. Very, very versatile. Works with all different types of music, all genres of music. So overall, I'd say for most people, the THX 789 is going to be a very solid headphone amp. Doesn't color the tone at all. No background noise or distortion whatsoever, no, even if you turn it up really high. Yeah, so generally, I think this one's the way to go. If you have IEMs, planar magnetics, you know, high sensitivity, low sensitivity, dynamic headphones, it'll work with everything. Tube headphone amps like the xDuoo TA-26, more picky with what types of genres of music, what types of headphones they pair well with. So yeah, if you listen to a lot of vocal tracks, a lot of mid-range heavy tracks, guitar tracks and stuff like that, it's really nice. High sensitivity headphones don't really work. Low sensitivity headphones and high impedance headphones work well with this amp. So it's a little bit more picky, but if you find the right combination, then this thing is like magic. You know, it's very fun, very engaging, very nice experience if you have the right combination. But definitely more picky than this one. So that's what I have to say about these two as well. Is just keep in mind, tube headphone amps more picky. Solid state amps are going to be more versatile, but especially this one, the 789, works well with pretty much all different types of headphones and earphones, because yeah, it's got 3 different settings and pretty much no background noise. This one, if you use like a high sensitivity headphones, earphones, or IEMs or something like that, you're going to hear a lot of background noise and distortion come from this. So yeah, that's my opinion of these two. It really depends what types of music you listen to, what type of headphones do you have, what type of experience do you want. Do you want a fun, engaging experience, but more pickier, or do you want a more versatile, amp that does more and is more reference sounding? Really depends what you want.